So, without further ado, Steve and David Clark. Yeah.
Let's see. Good morning.
Good morning.
We were wondering whether we should do this whole presentation in cone head or tinfoil hats or anything else, but David just wants me to get on the point here. I'd like to thank Luca for organizing these spoil weeks. I think it's important for the community of people who are engaged in this work to meet periodically, compare notes, compare experiences and tales, and build camaraderie, all those things. I think it's an important thing to do, and I thank you for the opportunity to present our project. On a more personal note, Warren Miller, the filmmaker, said that if you don't get it done this year, you'll be a year older when you do. And this gave us an opportunity, or catalyzed for Dave and I a chance to actually execute our program with a significant deadline. We actually said we're going to be here now, which actually makes you get started and move. For the last month and a half, we've been obsessing, putting things off, neglecting our personal relationships as we drive through this completion of this thing. Further, as a parent and a son doing this, I can recommend the Dad and Lad project like this to any parent at any point. It's challenging, it's exciting, it's interesting to find out who your child turned into. You haven't really grown up until he says, "Fuck you, Dad, you're wrong," and you realize you are. I'm very proud of David. This is in fact his project. I'm mostly a consultant to it. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm probably best known in this group for the guy that promoted C-class catamarans for years. Those little tiny wing sail catamarans that everyone said were too large and expensive, that were the prototypes for the America's Cup catamarans. So it wasn't until they got to be 3 times bigger that they gained global attention. What you don't know is that I've also spent my professional career in production boat building as owner of Vanguard sailboats. By the end, before we sold the company, we were building 3,000 boats a year. So I was the executive boat builder of that, which is like the executive chef. And my job was in research and development, new products, process controls, those nitty-gritty parts of boat building. When I started in this bracket, Peter Harkin looked at me and said, "Any asshole can make one. Come back and talk to me after you build 100 of them, they're all the same." And so learning how to deconstruct the art of boat building as I understood it into something that could be done repeatedly, reliably by a bunch of people who didn't necessarily know how the end product was actually going to be used, was what I spent what I used my English degree for. I'd like to, at this point, then hand off to David, who will go through how he got here.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dave Clark. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and it's an absolute pleasure to be introducing this product. There's a long story behind this that I'll try and get through pretty quickly, a long series of explanations and theories behind these things that drive them, and a set of convictions that has pushed us forward through all of this for the last year, and keeping this under our hats in secret and working night and day over it. Essentially, the UFO is one of the most glorious examples of mission creep ever. In that, this all starts 9 years ago in 2007, right here, when Mr. Andrew McDougall was right there in the back of the room. Huge thanks to him. Basically, on power of will alone, distorted reality and made the international moth something that was actually going around the world. You could hop on and try one out. And I did, and 2 minutes later, I was absolutely addicted to hydrocoiling. The fact is that it's transformative. The boat flew. The boat is a flying boat. It's in the air. It is a unique experience. It is nothing like sailing before, and I had to have it. So much so, in fact, that by the third day, Rowan was there, Bora was there, my friend Carl was there with his prowler, my friend Bill was there with his home-built sort of Blade Runner knockoff type boat. By the third day, I was arranging with Bill to borrow his tooling and build myself a boat because the flying could not be allowed to stop. There's a slight problem with this, the Bushkashi Moth project. One objective, keep me up in the air. I have good guidance, I have free tooling, however, I'm 16 and I've got other irons in the fire, time poor, expertise poor, cash poor, and ultimately it fell by the wayside and I went slipping back into other grassroots stingy development, working in the other development class I'm in, which is the International Canoe. Along the way, I learned a couple of other things in the world of sailing. While getting an economics degree, I started applying when I was learning to that. We are in a technologically rich period right now, and at the same time in North America, sailing is dominated by small elderly designs which are mass-produced, and the sport itself is falling by the wayside. We are demographically in extreme danger. So how is it that we live in this glorious future where the AC-72 flies down San Francisco Bay? We've created a NASA-like achievement here, and the sport is in trouble. Well, if you ask some people who have been frustrated by this, you'll find out that Americans are stupid and hate fun. And that's the sound of someone who doesn't know the causes behind these phenomena. Actually, if you go crunch a little data set that I built of what people participated in around here and what's going on, you find a strong regression between the older the design is, no matter how recently the boat itself was built, the cheaper it gets. And the fact is that wages have in fact been declining over the last 40 years in the United States, and so spending power is vital. There is in fact an apparent price ceiling for the cost of a dinghy, or cost of any small craft in the United States that's satisfied by the Laser, the Sunfish, the Alpines, the Windsurfer, the Kiteboard, the 29, the Cup 420, the Hobie 16, and the list goes on. Below that ceiling, people acquire boats. Above it, there's a confounding variable. New boats are awesome. Boats that foil are awesome. Boats that you get to develop yourself are awesome. People do want quality, and they actually confound the data because you look at the A-class fleet here and it's well subscribed. But there's a huge wad of people who are sticking with elderly technology and not having any fun and losing their interest in the sport because it's accessible price-wise and because it's easy to use. There's actually a cost climb going on in sailing because we've got so good at making these things great, and we have a subset of people. We're all guilty of it here. I'm guilty of it personally. C-Class is guilty of it. We do this all the time. It's fun. We throw more stuff into the boat. It gets more fun. And we've actually raised the price of it, adjusting for inflation and just in general, while increasing quality. But every other luxury good in the world, if you want to look at economic affordances, the price of a television set between 1930 and today has dropped by 95%, while the price of, the quality of TV, the access that you get, the things that come out of it got better. The price of a car, a basic automobile has gone down by 50% adjusting for inflation since the Model T Ford. Every other product that people use out there is trying desperately to get more affordable, and that is how it's growing usership and it's gaining quality while it's doing that. So it would then follow, people want, I got a little off. The fact of the matter is that people do really want performance. They do, there's no one-to-one relationship between how much money you have and how much you like going fast. That's simply untrue, that would be arrogant to assume. So therefore, to expand the sport of sailing, we must increase accessible performance while also driving costs down. And this is where I began to bash my head against the wall and believe that Americans are stupid and hate fun. And I need to ask my dad in here because he was ingenious enough to crack this problem.
Well, that's what we say.
says you should put hydrofoils on something simple.
Yeah, so the design brief for the UFO, as it was, sorry. I first saw Brett Burville's hydrofoil. Let me go back one step further. I'm an inveterate model maker. When I was a kid, when I saw a boat in a magazine or in a book or something like that, I built a model of it. I built a model of all the IOR boats, the one-tonners, they were crude, they were fat, they were quick and dirty, but they were attempt aesthetic. So I got a copy of Bernard Smith's 40-knot sailboat. I found that in my father's library, and I built a bunch of them. They didn't work very well, but so I've been playing with this stuff for a long, long time. And when I saw the Brett Burville's moth, I said, that's cool, but he's making his life difficult being a moth. If you throw away the moth part of this, you get something interesting. And the hydrofoils are interesting enough, as we said earlier, a number of times. They're so good, they make something as bad as a lowrider moth as cool as a hydrofoil moth. And that, if you go from the state of the art of the lowrider moth, is just abysmal level. Marvelous in its way, but just no one bothered it, and no one was. 30 of them worldwide, sort of kind of thing. And all of a sudden, this fantastically quick thing. So the design brief for the UFO was to be stable, at rest, easy to maintain, near or below a $7,000 price point. Flies all the time, if not fast. From a aircraft design standpoint, it's a Piper Cub. It's not a F-111. It doesn't have to be. Hydrofoil sailboats get preoccupied with going 30 knots. They don't have to. There's some, you can, a little boat that goes 10, a 9-foot boat that goes 10 or 12 knots is a pretty satisfactory 9-foot boat. We want it to be safe from impact. That is to say, there's nothing to run into when you crash it. From separation, we didn't want it to blow away from you when you tipped over like an ACAT does. We wanted it to be secure so that when you got exhausted, you could actually sit on it and catch your breath. We didn't want to have a whole bunch of stuff on it that you could get stuck in traffic. That those seem to be the risk factors that would make people say, nice idea, but not for me. We want it to be compact. A bunch of the commercial attempts at hydrofoils in the past turned out to be large, ungainly devices. The Hobie trifoiler, Greg Petterman's inspired design, when you actually try to interact with it, is a huge, awkward, heavy thing. The trifoiler rig was even worse. It was bigger, it was heavier, it was impossible to move around. We actually owned one, and it was just brutal. The good thing was it was rotor molded plastic, so you could drag it up on the beach without actually having to be over the rocks without having to be nice to it. But it was just, it was awful. We wanted to use. We were not interested in trying to reinvent the hydrofoil, to come up with a unique hydrofoil arrangement that was, it was our special 100% the moth 2T foils with the forward foil not actuated with a wand. It has been thoroughly debugged. It has not necessarily been commercialized, but we felt that we could with a couple stunts, make that so it was a reliable, simple system that could be maintained by users. Sunfish Simple is a, is one of those ways of saying, look, that's the boat. I started out hating Sunfish. Then they sent my kids to college. The Sunfish is the best recreational sailboat. It's the gold standard from my standpoint. If whenever at Vanguard we had to test another recreational sailboat, the Laser Pico or the Laser Fun Boat or any of these things, I drag out the Sunfish, stick it in the water, and the Sunfish almost always kick their ass. You could put the boom up in the air and sail around with two people. You could put the boom down on the deck. Fun Look in the team rig was actually pretty sophisticated. And okay, we were looking for a crew weight of 110 to 220 pounds. So do I go to the next slide here? Yeah. So our design tools consist of saws, aluminum tubes, the hull of the moth he didn't finish, and we press play. Okay, so this is a cut down moth hulls held apart by some radial lowers with a pod in the middle. The core bit of it, and we got it so it sails along pretty well. In fact, it foiled the first day. We got lightning right away, which gave us all sorts of false confidence. It was like, oh, yeah, it's so simple. I mean, the wand was built with bent nails, and polyethylene and a couple of pieces of stuff that he cobbled together. It was unbelievable. Okay, so the outcome is 105 inches long. Not counting the gantry. The beam is 67 inches. That's the smallest we thought we could get away with and be stable. The floaty thing has to be stable enough so that the guy can sit on it happily, and it also has to have low enough drag so you can actually get it going fast enough to take off. The sail area of the 67 inches we sort of arrived at is a number of sort of minimum amount of stability we could have. The water line, the displacement was, let's see, we've got 7.8 square meters of sail. That's pretty well proven as a good square footage for a small hydrofoil. By getting the surface area down as much as possible, we're able to build it out of conventional production materials, vinyl ester glass, vinyl ester, fiberglass cloth, Soric core material, and a little bit of carbon in the beams to keep the red spots out of the FEA study. And the key bit of usability, which button? Okay, that button, is shown in this thing where the foils withdraw in between the two hulls, above the keel of the two hulls. This means the thing sits on the grass happily, or on the beach happily, upright. It has a halyard you can pull the sail. While the thing sits upright on the beach, you can roll it into the water or drag it into the water if you don't. It's going to be flying, so maybe you don't get that much, but it's not that robust. You can roll it into the water. It sits by the side of the water happily while you put the dolly away. It floats upright at the dock. The greatest sin of American sailboat can possibly have is to tip over at the dock. And sail it with the rudder just slightly down. So in our muddy creek where the tide goes out, and sometimes it's only about 1.5 feet of water, you can sail the boat out to deep water and then put the foils down, which means that you don't have to have you can sail the boat in a wider variety of areas than you can the current iteration of hydrofoils, and fully and all the way to the right there's the foils down all the way.
Okay, so furthermore, our objective for me, this is again the mission creep thing where I was continuing to build my moth, but building it for my objectives, which was not to win regattas, but to keep flying around. And to have that process of learning, flying around, made as easy as possible, and have that maintenance problem while learning to fly around as reduced as possible, and the swimming time while learning to fly around as reduced as possible. Stability pays. The fact that it's a stable platform, you can aim it off, fly it, sit down, figure out what you were doing wrong, do it again, not capsize, and keep sailing around and not capsize, and think about something, stand up in the boat, change your tuning, not capsize. The amount of energy saved so far I've experienced has shortened the learning curve a great deal. So this is Dave Reed. He got in the boat for the first time just yesterday. He sailed it for, 10 minutes. He was flying within 5 and did not crash once, and got off the boat having learned something. And while we love to beat our chests and talk about how something's hard and it's interesting, and we learn a lot, we get beat up, and that's great. I mean, I'm part of classes that do that. Nonetheless, for keeping people in the sport of sailing and expanding hydroponics to as many people as possible, it's vital that we're doing it. This is a thing that's happened to me way too many times. That's an A-class catamaran blowing away from somebody downwind. Personally, I think that's a heinous design flaw. And it's necessary when you build a catamaran long enough and wide enough that you can't ride it from a turtle. But the consequence is that there's a large quantity of very nice A-cats down on the shore of Cuba now because of the fleet down in Florida. So problem solved. When you make the boat small enough, you can actually just ride it from a turtle conventionally. Go aboard, reach the main foil, stand your feet on the main beam, and pull the boat up, nose down, and then ride it normally. Further, once again, the smaller it is, the lower the surface area it is, the lighter it is, the sooner it flies. And we knock on ourselves a little bit for not exactly using design tools. That's not entirely correct, because the start of this project was going through 5 different hull configurations, forming surface area models of those, and seeing exactly how much we could get the mass down and exactly what shape could actually work this. And this is where we conclude. One of the amazing upsides of that is that we can fit 35 of these things into a high-cube container. So as far as getting these things shipped around the world, we are just behind the Optimus dinghy as far as containerization, because the gantry comes on after the fact. One of the other interesting things about it is that at Sail Newport, if you wanted to knock off one OptiRack, you could have a fleet of 6 of these taking up less space than one A-class. Space efficiency is vitally important here in the United States because we have a far more privatized waterline, so access is vital. Keeping compact storage of these boats near the water is vital. So this is just a hypothetical 6-boat rack sitting there. One of the other things that we're moderately proud of and has got people on Sailing Anarchy completely spinning their heads because they're not quite sure how this rigging system works. This is one of the more unique parts that went into it, and it was a question of solving the spar problem. We set a target for cost that we did not expect to hit because Olympic bronze medalists are made out of failed Olympic gold medalists. We were aiming at a $5,000 retail price for the objective of keeping ourselves creative. And as a result, you can't make the mistake of getting a custom tailored section made somewhere by some spar company in low volume at high margin in New Zealand or somewhere else. You have to find somewhere downstream of something far larger. And so we have cracked the problem with the windsurf spar, I believe, once and for all. What we have is a hybrid jumper strut arrangement here, where the wishbone is mated, and this is a very, very early drawing of this. Is the first one that I did back in October. So that's gone, but the rest of it is relatively intact. We have a hybrid wishbone system mated in compression to the front of the spar, enabling us to tension it forward and side to side, enabling it to stop drooping off as far to leeward as most attempts to make the windsurf spar have done. People have done it. Have a look at an MX Ray. It will put a sail up. It will look good in a dinghy park, and then you see this heinous drag spike as the puff comes on. The boat actually slows down the puff because it not only loses effective area, it gains an enormous amount of just drag. So we're secured side to side and fore and aft, and furthermore, this cracks the banging problem, which is vital to getting foilers to go well upwind, because we don't need a large bag, we don't need a huge tension system. We've just solved it going directly there. We're tensioning against it with a spar, and we've managed to stay clear of, we do have wire, it's not wire actually, it's spectrum, but we do have strings, but they are not in your crash path. So the whole concept of running into your shrouds, we managed to stay clear of that because that's also a safety issue. Random aside, we also make sure that the trailing edges aren't sharp on the foils exactly, so that you don't get caught up on those, because there's enough horror stories of people severing their nerves in their forearms on the trailing edge of moth foils. Like that, I'm sure it's fast, but it's dangerous. One of the other things that ended up coming out of this is unique component was that since we're withdrawing the main foil from the center of the hull, we had to have the entire system, the entire control system mated to it, and it had to be forward of the mast, and as a result our lift distribution on the foils ends up being far more of a conventional canard. Technically, all centerline T-foil systems are in fact still canards. The rudder is not pulling down, or very, very rarely. So these are all hybrid canards, but we've gone for a far more 50-50 loading, merely because the hull mass is that much further aft, we had to. And you can see a pretty stark example of this. We have a tale of two Boras. That's Bora sailing his Mach 2, a few years ago, and that's him sailing the UFO right now, and so it's a bit more skippy. That is one thing that's relatively new about what's going on here. And we like it. It works relatively well. There's some moderate upsides to canards. If you look at the tow testing data on moth foils, you'll find that the dominant factor in lift drag actually in the data is not in fact section, it's not in fact planform, it's the flaps. The flapless foil is undefeated. My friend Carl built one in his shed in Los Angeles. It's been pulled down the Navy tow tank, and it's been run up against most production moth foils that can be thrown at the guy who runs the tank, and it's still undefeated. So the more rudder you're using to lift, the more beneficial your blend of lifting surface is, in that you have more flapless lift. And this is, thrown into takeoff state. It's got, 3 degrees extra nose up, and that sort of helps us float up, because while, high-end speed is a great objective, and designing stuff for high-end speed is great, also just getting the recreational flight component of it down and being able to zoom around pleasantly is basically what I wanted out of the moth when I started building it, and what a lot of my friends who recreationally sail moths still do. They zoom around, because that's really fun. Foil controls, we are essentially doing relatively normal stuff. We've got, a live hinge at the top, so we've got a nice smooth top in there, built with a gasket. We've got conventional bell cranks and push rods and wands, and we got a little bungee control on that. One thing that's a little bit unconventional is that we're driving the flap up purely at the site. It reduces buckling losses, and it's just easy to manufacture because you can disassemble the entire wand assembly quite quickly. It means you don't have to have it locked in there. We're also currently playing with on-the-water AOA adjusters. We're going to keep that on the rudder certainly, and maybe dial it back a bit on the main foil, because from a recreational perspective, tuning is great, but when you're handing this off to people who just want to have fun, giving someone enough rope to hang themselves is dangerous. And it's generally not fun. Being able to actually get out of tune altogether is no good. Presently, we are consistently flying in 8 knots. Luca has witnessed it a couple days ago, taking off in less, but that's not consistent. You find yourself shooting out the back of the puff and everything. That's just, it happens. It's not particularly amazing. In 8 knots wind speed, currently my peak, just sort of screwing around with a speed puck, is 15 knots, so we're going nearly 2 times wind speed, which is really rare for a production fiberglass boat aimed at a $7,000 price point. So we're faster than most things that don't fly. Our actual polar objective was to achieve the speed range of a 49er for a single-hander and at a far more accessible cost. And so we're getting there. I'll say this, there's a very valid question that gets asked. If it doesn't foil upwind, it isn't a foiler. That's pretty much true. Boat foils upwind, but it is far more of a skill job than you'd expect. So basically you enter training mode and play around, reaching around, get comfortable on the foils. And I have found personally there's a pocket of a relatively large amount of windward heel where the boat starts to work for you and boogie upwind. But what that means to a degree is that the boat won't get boring anytime soon. And that's one of our little tacit objectives here. You look at boats like the Laser class, where you can enter it from a beginner position and essentially sail in it, masochism included, for the rest of your life. That's an extremely efficient thing. There aren't cutoffs. Whereas if you look at the basic skiff track, where you're expected to upgrade every couple of years to the next most demanding skiff, or you look at the catamaran track, where you start off with Hobie Wave as a kid, and you go up to some other smaller, small Hobie, and you're slowly cranking up to an F-18, to an Acura F-20 or something. There's a hell of a lot of upgrades in there, and every single one of those things forms a choke point. Whenever you have to, in order to continue getting skill development, continue getting fun out of the project, you need to make some sort of economic choice. You need to sell your old boat and get a new one. That's an opportunity to leave sailing, and we don't want that. So we wanted to have something that you could walk into from an open bit and stay in for the rest of your life quite happily. So having a broad realm of skill development where it will continue to pay you back for the rest of the time you put into it, we thought was a plus. And yeah, it teaches you to foil without beating the hell out of you, which is, a problem that we're all aiming to go for. So 1 year in, we've built 5 prototypes. We've got 2 professionally infused ones out of a factory down the street. We're working out of CNC machine tools. We are moderately sophisticated. We're not going to go post about CFD or anything like that. We do a lot of this stuff on instinct and a lot of this stuff on our reads as designers. We are approaching production tooling at present. We've been amazed by the positive response so far. Let's put it this way, when you start getting unsolicited, I haven't touched the boat yet, but I want to put down a deposit type demands on you, it's time to start making some tools and start talking about how to produce this. And conveniently, we took that to heart from the start, so a lot of those questions we have relatively answered. But 80-20 is still a thing. We are presently working to establish international partnerships. We're in the courtship phase, and come talk to us. And email me at fulcrumspeedworks@gmail.com for any information on the progression of this project. If you're interested in buying one, or you're interested in learning more about it, or you have input, we are very open. Well, now that it's not a secret.
Is your price point still 5K?
No. No, you set those targets so that you don't lose them by that much. We found, or at least I've had a beef with the sailing industry for a while, that you can aim for not much more expensive than blank, or slightly less expensive than blank, and that's playing with the basic axiom that I work by: half of too much is not affordable. It's not necessarily affordable, so we set a harsh target. I can promise you right now that it will be retailing under 8,000. Retailing under 8,000. And I think, yes, we only missed by 50%, but at least we set the target low, so it's 50% of a very small amount. Anyways, I think that's us.
We have a couple more minutes. This is good. So even though we're going to do some Q&A in between, let's do some Q&A now. So George?
I'm just going to throw out a crazy ass idea, but maybe you could save some money by getting rid of the active control system. Your foil spacing is so much bigger than on a kite hybrid foil that your pitch stability, if you had downforce on your rudder all the time, you should be perfectly okay without a control system. No live flap, no actuators, no bungee cords. I mean,
George, that's awesome, but then I've just created one boat for you. You're missing the hip gimbaling component of flying a kite foil. Because when you're sitting down, it's going to be that much harder to work your body position. It's a far more massive
I
platform.
don't think so. I mean, look, that's only 23 inches. What's the spacing between your front foil and your back foil? Feet? 6 feet, 5 feet?
No, it's roughly equivalent to Mach 2.
In angles are making active pitch control.
I'm not that good. I really not.
Okay, no, wait. Try sitting down on your kite board and actively controlling it, and we'll talk.
But, I mean,
I'm just throwing that out. I mean, it's,
Wait, wait,
like I said, it's a crazy ass idea.
Oh, go for it. Like,
Your
help yourself.
drive line is even higher, right?
stand up and pay attention to what your toes are doing,
Yeah.
okay? Just standing up, okay?
But we could try this out,
Network.
Steve. Like,
That
we
is-
could take one of your boats and try it, right? We could lock it in that configuration and try to sail.
You know, actually, we've done that.
Have you?
Yeah.
And it sucked?
It was not, it didn't really work.
Okay,
It-
that's fine,
you know,
that's
so, I
forgiving.
mean, the point is that the free sale system that made, people tried breaking the drink to windward on sailboards for years, on sailboats for years. And they never got the benefit until you got to the free sale system where all of a sudden the human was able to twitch it in response to that stuff. The same thing happens with your feet and ankles and knees on the kiteboard. You're not even really aware of it, but the amount of suspension that you're providing and the inputs you're providing for your knees and ankles and hips and the whole damn thing, and the fact that your weight is being held up by the kite.
Right.
So you've got, so, oh dear, it goes terribly wrong, you bend your knees, jump out of the water, blow downwind for a second so you feel like you're putting your feet back down again. We don't have quite those affordances.
Yeah.
So I think it's, absolutely cool. I think it's a different problem.
Yeah.
Is that?
The coast would see outlets and waves,
Well, for one thing, we've taken it out in the mid-20s. I know it doesn't break. I mean, you have to depower like mad, and actually we're playing around with having the option of a smaller sail for dealing with that. We're working with North on that a little bit. But primarily, we're not really fighting for the idea of being a maximum heavier class. The boat's engineered well enough to take it, but everything gets squirrely up in the air with that much windage and headwind, especially when it gets phenomenally gusty. Chop states, we have ride height adjusters so we can actually withdraw the water enough to get down through the baseline of the wave. So we're handling conventional inshore chop. I'm not going ocean racing in it, however I am going frostbite again. Because we tested the first prototype throughout last winter. And I can launch it without getting my feet wet, so I'm kind of intent on keeping mine under my mattress in Boston and frostbiting it all winter.
Sailing in the winter, how is it with cavitation in cold water as well?
I didn't notice it.
We're not that sophisticated.
Likely you'll notice it.
I have a question. Almost back to the sunfish equation, that gold standard idea. And when I look at this boat, I think, two little 10-year-olds just taking it for a burn. In the design brief, I'm not going to ask as it stands right now, but in the design brief, is that model being considered that two kids that can sail their offie and know how to trim and ease and all this other stuff can grab it and go?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Do you think they can do it right now?
That depends on the kids.
Okay.
I'll say this, when the boat turtles, it creates a perfect little floating corral for them to hang out and cry. As opposed to most ones that actually keep falling off. You're sitting there inside the sealed up deck and you've got hulls on either side, it's quite safe.
Okay, good.
You're gonna throw some hot chocolate or something and get them to calm down.
So do you control the rudder angle of attack?
That's correct. Not with this respect, we've got a control wheel as on, say, the 123.
But do you have to do that continuously? You kind of set it?
No. It's controlled pretty much exclusively for heat by the wand. And the settings of rudder angle of attack are pretty much for point sail.
You change it for the day, pretty much on how fast you're going.
And what is the range?
Right now in a testing orientation, way too much.
How much do you think you can find?
Oh,
Plus minus 3.
We're playing with a really, really lifty range. Sorry, a really, really lifty foil. Actually, didn't mention that we're working as a team. So hull design's dad, rig development's me, and some other product management component of it. We've got the sails being designed by North. Casey over there did our engineering, and we actually commissioned the foils from Nat. So he's going down with us. Cool.
One quick question. What happens if you leave the foils out in the sun? Anything bad?
No, didn't notice it.
Our goal long-term is to make the struts out of aluminum, so they can be able to sit in the sun all day and most of your lifetime. And the rudders, the T's themselves are built out of a
Hybrid.
right now we're using epoxies, which we've got a very high PSFG. They're very stable, and that's actually, things staying stable in the heat is something I'm pretty religious about. So we're not as sophisticated as the mothballs with their, we're not trying to be as thin as we can possibly be and as stiff as we can possibly be. We've actually added section thickness and throttled off those ultimate design goals, those performance goals in order to be more producible.
As Mr. Spears stated earlier, the less you're going for top end, the easier the engineering gets.
So we're actually trying to be safe and producible on this stuff, yet get us to the range of performances that's acceptable, fun, good idea. The classic question about a designer is, well, how fast do you want to go? We'll say, give me a design brief that's accurate and I'll deliver it. So we're actually saying, if we go mid-teens while flying, that's pretty exciting to most people. I don't think we have to go 30 knots. I think actually it might even be a bad idea to go 30 knots.
We actually
because just consider the safety consequences of that extra 50% of speed. Okay, all of a sudden you've got your impact injuries, your entering the water injuries, all those things. You start having to wear helmets. You have to start keeping additional padding on. There's a whole nother world of safety there that you kind of tag. It's just tag the speed. At 10 miles an hour, human bodies are enormously durable. They were designed, around how fast they go. Humans run about 10 miles an hour. You run into a wall at about 10 miles an hour, probably going to live through it. You run into a wall at 30 miles an hour, less good a chance. And
that said, we are in high teens most of the time.
Right. So
the command within the design brief is that if we start heading beyond 25 knots, we have to slow the boat down. Because flapping knots ferry up to 25 knots is pretty damn fun. You should do it every once in a while. But doing it all the damn time and getting well beyond that is actually kind of more of a fetish activity.
On that note, awesome.
I mentioned I love my kid.
All right, this is fantastic and a great keynote opener. What we'll do is we can continue to ask just a couple of questions while Nat sets up his program, but I'll certainly say a big thank you to Steve and David.